Hello, welcome to the Death by Disney podcast. My name is Adam, and I'm attempting to watch all of the Disney movies that have ever been produced and give you my honest opinion about them. This is kind of like my climbing of Mount Everest, or riding a bike across Africa, or getting a 365-day streak on Duolingo. It's that hard. So, we're in the 1950s now, and I'm doing this chronologically, by the way. And there are a few movies that are really famous that Disney released in the 1950s, like, for example, Cinderella, Peter Pan, what else? Lady and the Tramp. There's lots of those. Sleeping Beauty. But there's lots of films that they put out that are not really well known. So if you are listening to this episode, I really, really appreciate it. And if you're listening to the other episodes that are about not so famous movies, I also appreciate it because sometimes they're really, really interesting to talk about. Sometimes they're much more interesting to talk about than the more famous ones. So today I'm going to be talking about a documentary that Walt Disney put out in 1953 called The Living Desert. This is a little bit ironic because you might be able to hear the rain outside of my window right now as I'm recording this episode talking about a movie about a desert. But anyway, that's what we're talking about. The Living Desert. As I said, it was released in 1953. It's an American nature documentary film that shows the everyday lives of the animals of the desert of the southwestern United States. And because this movie is a documentary from 1953, there is not a lot of traffic, I guess you could say, on the Internet Movie Database, so all of the trivia that is interesting about this film I put in my review already. So I don't have any specific trivia for you, but I will read now my review that I wrote after I watched this film. This is a very interesting film, not for what's actually in the film, although there is some craziness there. For example, this was released the year of the 25th Academy Awards, and this won an award for the Best Feature-Length Documentary, so it meant that Walt Disney won the most awards of any individual in a single year up to that point. It is interesting that most of those awards were all for different documentaries of different lengths, and one was for an animated short. The other interesting fact about this movie is that it made more money in Japan than Gone with the Wind did. The documentary is an exploration of life in the desert of the southwestern United States, and it focuses on different species. The craziest part is that there's this hoedown music when the scorpions are mating, which really makes you pay attention as it is not necessarily something that should be done in a dark nature documentary. One question about the documentary I have is how realistic is it? There are some scenes that seem like they would be really impossible to capture live. There's not a lot of personality in this, and the colors are faded. I would recommend it for people who like old nature documentaries or people who are obsessed with everything connected to Disney. But I think other people can watch the section with the hoedown and the scorpions on YouTube, and you don't need to watch the whole thing. I don't think it really needs to be revisited. So yeah, that's the interesting question, because I think it was Disney who got in trouble, maybe not at the time, but later for, and I'm not sure if this is an urban legend or not, but there was this documentary about lemmings, and it's the idea we have that lemmings fall each other off of cliffs and stuff, but they don't actually during the film, they were actually thrown off the cliff by the makers of the film. So I wonder how much this particular film was edited, because there's some things about like bobcats going up into cactuses to avoid pumas, mountain lions, I guess. And I've heard later that that's true, but I wonder, how is that such an often occurrence that you could be sitting in the desert and, filming that? And it's another question that's interesting about nature documentaries is a lot of these scenes are actually staged, you know. So I like nature documentaries, but I never really thought about how artificial a lot of them are, because you can be sitting in the African wild for a long time. Maybe Africa is a little bit of a different example, but you could be sitting in the middle of the desert for a long time and nothing interesting would happen because it's the desert and it's a big place and interesting things might be going on, but not where you're sitting. So that's an interesting topic about this film. The other interesting thing about the film is, like I said, there's not a lot of reviews on the Internet Movie Database about it, and the one that I just read is one of the lowest rated reviews, which is 5 out of 10. I gave the movie 5 out of 10. So I think I should also do that. I should give you my ratings on the my ratings of the movie. So my rating of the movie is 5 out of 10, and there was a few other ones. One was mentioning the hoedown thing that I mentioned, so I don't need to repeat that, but here is the other one. I dislike documentaries, but it's well done, and this is from Uguti27 from April 2019. The Living Desert is exactly what it promises. It is a documentary about the desert. It is nice and nothing special. The narration is informative and the visuals are interesting as well as sometimes stunning. If you want a well-made documentary about the desert, this might be right up your alley. My alley, however, is located down the street, so I can't give it a high score. So he's saying it's a good documentary, but he's giving it, or she is giving it, a bad score because they don't like documentaries. And I think that just shows you that they haven't watched good documentaries. Because even ones that are, I don't want to say good, and I don't remember what the title of this documentary was, but I think it was called something like Small Creatures, and it was on Netflix, and it was a documentary series about different small animals around the world. And they had one about, like, one section was about these desert mice, and it was really well done. So there are really great documentaries out there if you, and it's weird to say, I have to say, it's weird to say that you don't like documentaries, because documentaries is such a big field. You can, well, he's not saying that he doesn't like, or they're not saying, oh, he is saying, she is saying, they are saying that they don't like documentaries. But it's such a wide field. There's nature documentaries, there's political documentaries, there's historical documentaries, cultural documentaries, there's social documentaries. Documentaries, like, I think sometimes documentaries are much more interesting than fictional films. There's true crime documentaries because you get a glimpse of how people or how things really are. And of course, every documentarian has their own point of view, which is also interesting. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that this is the best nature documentary about the desert that has ever existed, but if you like Disney, you can watch it. Now, there wasn't also a lot of really positive reviews on the Internet Movie Database, so here is one of them. It's called The Best Desert Nature Footage Ever Made, from 3119 J. Marchese 22 from June 2003. Everyone of all ages should have the opportunity to see this great film. Living Desert took 3 years to make and was the spin-off of a doctoral thesis. It features real-life desert adventure footage, red-tailed hawk versus rattlesnake, ground squirrel versus Gila monster, kangaroo rat versus sidewinder. It's all here. The real highlight is the breathtaking 2 minute and 25-second confrontation in which a large female wasp subdues and paralyzes a tarantula with her stinger. The film also features beautiful botanical time-lapse photography in brilliant color. The Best Documentary Oscar was created specifically for this film, and it was the first recipient of the award. I've seen a lot of desert nature footage over the years, but Living Desert is still the standard by which all others are measured. So they really liked it, and it does have all of those things in it, but I wouldn't say brilliant color. It's Technicolor, but I would say our filmmaking capacities are better now. So we can make documentaries that look much better than this. I mean, this was written 20 years ago. So maybe at the time there wasn't a lot of nice looking documentaries, or maybe there were, but it was hard for you to find in 2003 any kind of documentary that you wanted to watch. And now it's easier. And as I said, all of those things are true, but I think the narration is kind of a bit of a pain, and the hoedown music, while crazy, doesn't make this documentary sort of scientifically objective or whatever. Maybe that's not the right word. It kind of is an odd choice, an odd artistic choice, I would say. Okay, that is all for The Living Desert. And next week, we're going to be talking about a movie that's really hard to find and I haven't actually seen yet, which is this is the first time in the podcast that this has happened, so I have to see that before next week, called Rob Roy, the Highland Rogue. So, yeah, wish me luck. And tune in next week for that. And tell your friends about the podcast, leave a review, subscribe, all that jazz, and check out some other episodes of the podcast. Thank you. Bye.